Hey everybody, I want to welcome you to Fast Track Coaching. I'm not sure which number episode this is, but it matters not a whole lot given our guest today. I'll get to that in just 1 second. If you're new to Fast Track Coaching and you've never been here before, this is just a very brief coffee time conversation over the internet where I get to have some pretty remarkable people on, and we want to talk specifically about creativity in business and how you can move and take ground tangibly and concretely right now. And honestly, I can't imagine a better guest than our own Chris Guillebeau. And when I say our own, I mean like the internet's own. Chris, welcome to the show.
Dane, thanks so much for having me. It's an honor.
It's my pleasure. And honestly, it's funny. The more rebels we get on this show, the more it seems like viewers appreciate it. And you're about as nice a rebel there is on the planet. But you are a rebel. It's striking to me. Your book, The Art of Nonconformity, and your blog, and all that you've done. Share a little bit, and I don't feel like you have to be too long-winded with it, but just share a little bit about how you got to where you are and what you're up to.
Yeah, sure. You know, the Art of Nonconformity thing, it's in many ways it is about being a rebel, but hopefully it's about being a rebel for good and about creating something and making something that improves the state of the world, which is something I know you talk a lot about. So, where to start? I'm a writer, traveler, entrepreneur. I've been self-employed for pretty much all my adult life. That's not because I was a genius or an entrepreneur, quote unquote, for a long time. I just mostly was motivated to not have a job. Like I didn't want to answer to someone else. I wanted to, be responsible for myself and my own well-being. And eventually I got some higher level motivations, but not so much in the beginning. I worked in West Africa for about 4 years. I was a volunteer there. It was a great experience, really affected a lot of my worldview. And then after I came back to the States with my wife, Jolie, did a grad school program, which was somewhat interesting, but then I started writing. So about 4 years ago, I started the Art of Nonconformity site. It became a book. I started doing tours and meetups. I'm on this quest to visit every country in the world, so I write about that. I start businesses, I write things, I like to create, a lot like you and probably a lot like a lot of the listeners.
Well, it's funny that there's so much in your history, and I just want to touch on a couple pieces because there might be some photographers who might not know who you are, which would be a little shocking, but they'll get started now. You said a couple things that were striking. Number one, you didn't want to work for the man, at least initially, and then you framed it as you wanted to be responsible in that position of kind of owning your life. Talk a little bit about the difference between just not wanting, like being rebellious for rebellious sake, and actually taking the well, I've heard you say this one quote, you actually can get it all in your life, you just can't get it all at the same time, or
right,
some paraphrased version of that.
Something like you can have anything you want, but probably not everything, so it's a matter of deciding on importance and deciding on priorities. So in my case, I think it was an evolution of motivations. I did kind of start out as a rebel at a young age. Like I stole cars. I was a high school dropout. Fortunately, I kind of outgrew that pretty quickly. But yeah, I mean, I guess the motivation was I wasn't a good employee. I was always very independent-minded. It's not like I had a terrible boss or anything. It's just, I realized I really wasn't, suited to work in the traditional workplace, which again is probably similar to a lot of your listeners. So, in the beginning, the motivation was, how can I, as you say, be responsible and, make a living? What can I do? This was 12 years ago, so I started selling things on eBay. I learned how to build websites back when it was easy to do so. Now designers are amazing, so I don't do it. I learned, all these little tricks and things that I did for a while, and that was fine, but I wasn't really, building anything. I wasn't really contributing anything positive to the state of the world. So I guess as time went by, and then also the 4 years in Africa really helped a lot. I kind of felt like, I'm very privileged to be able to do this, and I should feel really grateful for the chance for the fact that I've learned to be self-employed and that I don't have to go to this life-sucking job, like a lot of people do. And really, what motivates me is to help other people do that and to do what I want to do, but then hopefully also contribute something positive as well. So I think it's usually an evolution like that, right? It's like it's okay to be motivated to do your own thing for the sake of doing it. That's fine. But I think after a while, people realize like, okay, I don't want to just sit on the beach all day. I don't want to just kind of withdraw into myself. I actually want to connect with other people.
And it sounds like that had something happened in Africa that really shifted for you. What happened over there on your trip?
Well, it was kind of a post 9/11 thing. So it was the going to Africa. It was like 9/11 happened, and I was depressed, just like everybody else in America and many people around the world, and just trying to figure out, what do I do with my life, and how can I, make some kind of positive contribution. And I looked around at what I was doing at home in America, and it just didn't seem that significant. And so I thought, surely there's something more. And so I just heard about this volunteer opportunity to go and live on a hospital ship. I had no medical skills, but fortunately they needed other people to do logistics and, just run the whole operation. So I went there and, 4 years in Sierra Leone and Liberia, the poorest countries in the world. And there's a lot of, lessons and personal change and transformation that happened to me there. And I mean, for me, the fascinating thing was Julie and I, my wife, we would come home once a year. We talk with people, and people were always really amazed, and they would say, "Oh, it's great what you guys are doing." And we realized pretty quickly that that wasn't the whole story. Like, it was great that we could do this, but for us, it was changing our lives too, for the better. So it was really the best decision that we made. So I think that had a lot to do with it.
So you find yourself calibrated. You're clear on what you want to do, and we're talking to you now in a moment in your life where you have built a lot of assets that are available to the world. So if people go to your blog or they follow you on Twitter or Facebook or wherever, they can get access to a lot of resources on how to take kind of an independent individual stance and live out their life in a methodical, disciplined, very disciplined actually way. Sure. That's really striking. And as you mentioned, our viewers, there's a lot of folks who are on the other end of this video who are wrestling with a lot of those ideas, but they're not as unencumbered. They're in situations where maybe their spouse lost a job and they have to become a photographer, or maybe they are still single but they have debt, or whatever it is. What are some kind of pre-choices that need to be made before, or the kind of context that needs to be set for someone to be in a situation where they can choose their own adventure?
Sure. Yeah, very good question. I think probably the first thing is maybe defining what that adventure is going to be and figuring out what it is that they want, and
like getting a vision for it and articulating it.
Yeah, getting a vision, and it's okay if you don't know the whole thing, right? But discontent is really important. If you start feeling dissatisfied or discontent, you have to deal with that one way or the other. I think a lot of people are unhappy just because they ignore that discontent. They think it'll just go away. And so, all these things that you mentioned, these things in life that encumber us, responsibilities, debt, family situation, those things are very real, and so I don't want to be like pie in the sky, but I do think, if something matters to you, if it matters to you more than anything else, you will find a way to kind of make choices and begin, following that path. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to, quit your job and walk away from everything, right away, especially if you're middle-aged and have a family or, some other responsibilities. I understand that. Sure. But, I'm a big believer in small changes. I'm a big believer in taking action over what we are responsible for, over what we can do. A lot of the readers in my community, it's a really diverse community with people from all ages and backgrounds, and everybody has their own story, right? So some people do make these dramatic changes all at once, and other people, it's more of a mental shift that happens, and then the physical actions follow. So if it's a situation like money, then there's two things you can do. You can say, okay, I can focus on reducing debt and reducing expenses, or I can focus on increasing income, to provide for some of those things. Maybe like I keep my day job, but I do something on the side. What can I do to establish some freedom? I mean, a lot of the monetary projects that I've done, in the beginning they don't make very much money, but I usually feel very motivated by them, even if it's a small amount of money, because I'm like, that was something that I did that came in, without a paycheck, without anything else. So I would always encourage people, if you can start something small, do that. That's what nights and weekends are for.
Well, let's talk a little bit about those creativity efforts that you've taken on. Like one that's come up for me a lot, that actually did a whole retreat around your book, The Tower. I took off to San Francisco, and about 2 months later, a friend of mine actually put me on to the video game that you talked about.
Did you get addicted to it?
I actually chose not to take it on because I was so nervous about it. But But what I was struck by in that process was, and this comes up a lot with photographers who want to do it, shoot professionally, and other creatives, writers, everybody. This idea of taking on personal projects because they're meaningful to you, and then, and if you're able to make money from them later, well, then maybe you will. I know for you, it's remarkable how much you are willing to create these written pieces and different things, and then you put it out there, and there's, in fact, it seems like you work really hard to make sure nobody gives you money for those things.
Well, in some ways, yes, in some ways, no, right? I mean, I have plenty of paid products, too, and I'm happy to have those.
Sure.
But, yeah, I know I'm motivated to put out resources. I'm motivated to create, right? And I know you have the same motivation. I'm motivated to create. Right. Like, I derive enjoyment from, like, making things and then sharing them with the world. And so, I don't know, there's a couple of things that we could say about that. I probably interrupted you before you actually asked the real question.
I'll keep my question. You keep going. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, so the situation with the tower, basically, I'm creating this model of, I'm providing a model of creating, and I'm saying, what if we oriented our lives around creative work? And there's all these different theories about the meaning of life and different philosophies and religious perspectives, and all those things, may be valid. Here's something else, What about this idea of orienting our life around creative work? And every day we get up and we're like, what am I gonna make? What am I gonna share with the world? And so, I think both things are important, the making and the sharing, because I started with this project to visit every country in the world, and that was somewhat interesting, to some people, but it was mostly just a personal, individual quest, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I had to learn kind of over time, how can I connect that to other people? Like, how can I make, how can other people find some meaning or, I don't know if it's validation, but some kind of identity. How can they see that and then do something on their own? Like, that to me was much, much more powerful, figuring out, doing my own thing and then how to connect it to others. So that's what photographers do well, right? They pursue their art and then they share it in some fashion, whether online or offline or installation or whatever. But we mentioned Seth Godin earlier. He has a theory that that art is not art unless it's actually shared, which is kind of controversial, and you could say all kinds of things about it. But whether that's true in essence or not, I certainly believe that art is much more powerful, when it goes out into the world and other people are able to be involved with it.
Well, that's actually a fantastic setup to the question I was actually going to get to.
The real one.
And it's not the real. This is you deepened it on many levels, and it has to do with this juxtaposition of creativity and commerce, or monetizing these things that you're creating. And you're right. I think that as someone who aspires to similar things that you've done in different spaces. I've studied your site. I've been like, what is he doing, and how is he inviting people here? And I know I'm not the only guy who's played this game, but it's striking to me how it almost is like you've created a firewall, and this is just a perception, a firewall between the creative act and creating stuff and doing stuff, whether it be your very ambitious challenge of visiting every city or country in the world, and I think you're in the high hundreds somewhere. But is there a need for a separation of church and state relative to creativity and commerce? Is it valuable to just create for creation's sake and then decide what you're going to do with it? Or because and here's the backdrop, Mike. Okay. I'm in a lot of conversations with a lot of photographers who initially got in because they wanted to create, and then in the middle of that they find themselves almost tempted or wooed away. They're in a scarcity position. And they seem to be like, well, where's the opportunity? And I'm going to go shoot that, even though has nothing to do with what they initially got in the game for. So can you comment a little bit about is that dynamic of the monetization and the creative process, and what goes through your mind, and how do you negotiate that?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. I'm trying to think where to begin. It's interesting that you mentioned the firewall. I would say that there's not a firewall, at least in what I'm trying to do. I would say I'm trying to create something I'm trying to create convergence. I'm trying to create something that's, interrelated. I'm not a big believer in life-work balance, to begin with, and so I would then apply that to this, the concept of creativity and commerce. I'm not really a believer in the church and state separation. I'm more interested in doing something that just makes sense, and making money is certainly part of that, and creating is part of that. But I guess in some ways it depends on the project, The manifesto project we mentioned, that was certainly like that is going to serve the world much better if it's free. You know, if it's paid, I'm sure some people will buy it, but like a small fraction, you know, of them. But then I also have stuff that's paid, and then as the word goes out, more people come into my network. I don't really pitch stuff that much, but when I do, you know, people are going to respond to it, and I guess I want to feel good about that. You know, first of all, I want to sleep at night, but then, you know, as part of that, there's nothing wrong with making money and doing commercial projects. So I guess I would just, you know, when you encounter an opportunity, you usually know in your heart, like, or, you know, however you conceive of it, usually can tell, like, is this something that I feel good about? Is this something that's going to add value? If it does, then, you know, I would certainly pursue it if it's a paid project. So I guess I'm not so interested in the separation. I'm interested in, like, what makes sense, you know, and
yeah, well, and I love that, especially as an end result. I'm with you. I hate the idea of life-work balance. I like the idea of committing to whatever I'm at immediately and all in on that thing. But I was especially struck by this question of, you know, what would serve the world the most, whatever world that is, whether it's kind of a grandiose world or it's, you know, just who I think would most benefit from a creation I put together. I'm going to think about that for a while, because that's an interesting filter, because it seems to almost be like as you're creating something that you really do, and maybe this is part of your worldview, you really do believe that there is kind of a highest and best use of a creation that you come up with, and you're trying to kind of solve this kind of metaphysical riddle of where should this be positioned best. Is that too poetic or kind of stretch?
No, it's fine. I think I don't know if I would, like, I don't know if it's so sharply defined, you know. That's the only thing I would say, because I think a lot of things can go either way. You know, I think you know, it's like think of like a print book or something. You have a print book out that costs, you know, $13 or $15 or whatever at Amazon. You know, it's not going to really make me a lot of money, but there it is for sale. You know, so I guess I don't know. Some projects can go either way. I guess I tend to focus not so much on those distinctions and like thinking about it so much. I just tend to focus on, like, what's the next thing, you know, and the next thing may be totally commercial. It may be totally nonprofit. It may, you know, probably 50% or greater odds that it's going to have a blend of both of those things, you know. But I just focus mostly on what's the next thing, what am I going to get out, and then when that's done, what's next, you know. I like the building process.
Well, let's switch gears for a second. I want to go to a scenario. So you're traveling in some foreign country, and again, I've read these kinds of dynamics on your blog, but I'm picturing you in an environment where things aren't going your way. You're in a country, maybe you missed a flight, you missed a train, you missed a bus, you got mud in your sneakers, whatever it is, someone stole your bag, and your circumstances are showing up in a way that aren't your preference, and you have to, and you're asking the question, well, what's next? How do you negotiate those moments where serendipity is not on your side?
Okay, I usually whine, I complain, I bitch a little bit to myself, I feel sorry for myself. And then I try to keep that process, you know, as quick as possible. You know I'm going to do that. I know I'm going to be like, oh, you know, it's so hard to travel the world and, like, work from anywhere and, like, you know, have all this freedom and opportunity, you know. And then, like, you know, then we shut that down. And then it's like, okay, now I have to, like, take matters into my own hands because no one's going to solve this for me. You know, so then I guess I start, I start going through GTD thinking and, like, okay, what's the outcome I'm looking for here? I was hoping to do this, but this did not take place, you know. Therefore, I need to readjust. You know, like, what is the next scenario? What are the options? And I guess
it's actionable, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because, you know, you can get stuck on things forever, and I do. You know, but I hate that about myself, because then like, you can't change anything about that scenario if the flight has already departed or whatever. You can only take responsibility for the future. So I guess I just try to be future-minded in whatever I do and limit the whining process. But it is definitely still there.
Well, honestly, I think for myself and for the folks at home listening, that this really is that's a breath of fresh air. Because I think, honestly, when it's tempting to when in looking at just the finished product of things to realize or to think that there is no process. That you just kind of wake up one day and, oh, here's, you know,
but it's
the new
all
thing.
Process. You know, that's the funny thing. No, it's all process. You know, and you know, I think every working artist or every artist who's passionate about creating understands that, and that's definitely something that maybe the average person, you know, on the other side of the screen or other side of the art form, whatever it is, maybe they don't see. But I think it's not that process is supplementary; it's that process is almost everything, you know.
including the final product. That's just
Sure.
one milestone along the way.
Right, of course.
Well, I should mention, just for context, in case people didn't catch it there, when Chris mentioned GTD, most of you guys are familiar with this, but if you're not, check out David Allen's Getting Things Done. It's a whole, or just Google it. There's a gazillion cult followers around this idea, and I'm one of them. And I think there's a lot of value in that if you want to follow up on that. I do want to talk about this new project that is coming into the world, this $100 startup book, and of course, there are some cynics on our show that are at home rolling their eyes going, okay, great, $100 startup, great. This works for Chris and his wife and no kids and a cat. But, what about me and my world? And talk a little bit about what led to you creating this book called $100 Startup, and is it just a clever hook to people to get people to pick it up?
That's all it is, Dane. It's just a hook. But I'm giving away my secret. The $100 Startup is actually, it's not really about me at all. The first book I wrote, The Art of Nonconformity, was a lot of my own story, and the $100 Startup has some of my story, but actually it's a comprehensive study that I've been doing for about 2.5 years, talking with all kinds of people who I call them like accidental entrepreneurs or unexpected entrepreneurs. There's a lot of creatives, but all kinds of other people who are working corporate jobs and they got fired or laid off or something, and they had to kind of find a way to like navigate this whole new economy. So it's really the collective story of about 70 different people from all walks of life. A lot of them are married with kids. A lot of them were older, some were younger, from all over the world. It's very diverse. And so it's a story of how they've created a successful business, based on following their passion, based on following something that they were really excited about, and then finding a way to connect that, to the marketplace. So it's actually a very data-driven book. Like everybody in the study had to provide all kinds of details. They had to provide lots of financials. They had to talk about how much money they make every year, how much it costs to start up their business, which in many cases was less than $100. Not in every case. I think our average was something like $350, but we decided like the $346 startup didn't sound as good as the $100 startup.
I don't know, 279 days to an overnight success sounded worked for you. So.
This is true, yes. But $100, but I mean, a lot of them are under $100. Most of them are under $1,000. And the book just kind of goes through how they did it and what went right and what went wrong and how they recovered. And so it's the collective story of all these people, and then it's a blueprint, for readers to follow on their own as well.
Are they all for-profit or some non-profit? Anything in the social sector?
Yeah, this book focuses mostly on for-profit. A lot of them have like a non-profit element to what they're doing, which is kind of like my thing. Then there are some social things as well. But I'm interested in businesses that kind of connect these things. There's a story, there in California of I think it's called Heritage Link Brands. It's a couple who started importing wine from South Africa, but they imported wine from only black-owned vineyards. And so the story there is like, South Africa is 80% black, but only 3% of the vineyards were owned by black South Africans. And so they started this whole business, kind of catering to that market, bringing those wines to the United States. So it's a for-profit $1 million business, but it also has this social component too.
I like that a lot. It's funny. You remind me a lot of. I've never met Jim, but Jim Collins and the work that I've read on him, and that it seems like you're the idea of it being data-driven rather than just kind of your off the top of your head ideas, and that you've been processing this for quite a while. It sounds like a pretty interesting resource. Who are some other folks that are in the book that, like, one person that comes to mind I just wanted to mention is we have a mutual friend, I think, in Todd Henry, Accidental Creative, and a couple other mutual friends, and Ann Handley and others, but are there some other folks that are of note that people might know, or are most of these folks going to be people that you've never heard of, but you're going to want to hear their story? Yeah, that second thing is what I really focused on, because I feel like there's a lot of resources that focus on people who are known, and also a lot of these things tend to focus on like celebrity bloggers, so to speak. That's right, and that's fine. But like I wanted to act like, what about ordinary people, who didn't necessarily want to start a blog or whatever? So there's a lot of stories of people that you've never heard of, but they're making $100,000 a year and doing something, to a very small audience, but it's something that they're very excited about. They've found some kind of skill that connects with the marketplace. There are some photographers, there are some creatives, there are some retail store owners, people who opened retail stores during the recession and have actually been very successful at it.
So I'm sure there's some people that are known, but I would say most of them are just regular people.
Got it. So if people want to have a chance, I have one last question before we're done, but if people want to have a chance to either pick up the book, I'm assuming they can get it at all the regular outlets, they can go to your blog, and you're also in the midst of a tour, and they can find out all the dates on your blog as well?
Yep, that's right, or 100startup.com. I'm doing 25 cities in North America to start with, and then we're going to do the world's first 7-continent book tour. So after I finish North America, we'll be going overseas for that.
That's great. And is this going to help with any of your country count, or are these places you've been to already?
At this point, I have very few countries left, and the countries that are left are places like Guinea-Bissau and Congo-Brazzaville. So I do have readers all over the world, and I'm fortunate for that. But I don't know how many people I have in those places. So the book tour is more just to meet the readers that I already have in different places. So I'm excited about that.
That's great. Well, the last question I want to get to is pretty basic, and it's one I like to ask a lot of my guests. And it's just, if you were to go again, kind of knowing what you know now, but it's pre-Africa, pre-9/11.
Oh wow!
But you're clued in. And let's up the ante a little bit further. Let's say you are encumbered, like life is isn't simple, and you have a little debt. It's recession, but you're young and you're agile and you're wise. What do you do in the first kind of season, whether that be kind of this week, this month, this quarter, this year? How do you move forward? What are the first things that you take action
Well, what's my goal? Like you've given me the scenario, but what am I trying to do? Am I trying to start the business? Is that what my goal is? Like to establish self-sufficiency, or is it to do Is it to pursue a career? Is it what?
Let's go with self-sufficiency, because I think that's really again, I think that's the commonality here in both what you're doing and the folks at home viewing.
Okay, great. Yeah, in some ways it's hard to think of because we're all shaped by our experiences, right? And so like everything.
So to account for your experiences is probably part of it then.
Yes. Yeah. Very good. I mean, I think like all of us have this unique history. So one thing I always encourage people to do when they're like, I don't have any business ideas, I don't know what I'm good at. I always say like, okay, what do other people ask you about? Because there's probably things that that people are always asking you. They're asking you about some kind of software or something with a computer. They're asking you about some technical skill. They're asking you about something to do with travel or art or whatever. So just brief diversion. One of the stories in the book is a guy named Brett Kelly, also from California, and he was a self-described geek. He loved Evernote. And he realized there was no like English language manual for Evernote. Like Evernote itself had never made one. Nobody else had. So he documented everything and made all these screenshots and created this product called Evernote Essentials. You put it out for $25, and that ebook has sold $170,000 worth of copies so far in the past year. One ebook, and it's like 95% profit for him basically.
Wow.
And so that one project has allowed him and his wife to get out of debt. He and his wife were like trading off hours with the kids, not able to have much family time, and now they're together. It's like his whole life has been transformed by this project. So,
wow.
Think about the skills that you have, think about what people ask you, and think about what you're passionate about, and make a list of those things. Not everything that you're passionate about is going to be commercially viable. You might be passionate about going to the sushi restaurant or whatever, but you just have to do that on your own. But there's a connection. There's a convergence between what you're passionate about, what you're skilled at, and what other people value enough to spend money on. That's what Brett found out. That's what a lot of these stories are about. So I guess with all this so-called wisdom that I had acquired, in the 10 years that I got back, I would really start focusing on that. And then the second part of it would be whatever I could do quickly to put something together and get it out there and make an offer without spending money. I would spend $10 on my domain name, except it would be like $100 for a domain name 10 years ago. But
right.
I would get my little GeoCities website up, and I would be like, I am now the expert on whatever it is, and you can hire me, here through PayPal, which may have not actually been around then. But the point is, I would like very quickly, I would put something out to the world. I would find a way to get one customer, and then that one customer, even if they're paying me like $5, I would treat that customer like the most important person in the world, and then I would be like, who else do you know that I could help with this, If I was trying to build a platform, I might have 5 readers, and one of them would be my grandma. But again, most important people in the world, and those 5 people would lead me to 10 people and 50, and I would just build from there, and hopefully, over time, more structure would come about. But the point is, the skills you have are all you need. Like, you have this unique experience. Everyone does, You don't have to go to Africa or every country in the world or whatever. You have something that's valuable. And so I would focus relentlessly on trying to figure that out.
Well, a bunch of what I'm hearing in that is take action, don't go into debt necessarily, look for convergence. It's okay to be an expert on something.
Yeah.
Look resourcefully, one customer at a time, build the platform one person at a time, be patient. Skills you have are what you have, and this idea of focus. And I guess that's the piece that I'm left with, and I'm excited about moving forward. I can't wait to get your book. Is drilling down around because it sounds like you have to say no to a lot of things to make all of this work.
Yeah, I suppose, but I say yes to what I'm excited about. I actually say yes a lot more than I say no. I heard somebody said once, like, you should say no 12 times for every one time you say yes. I think for me it's the opposite.
Huh. Wow. Well, I'm glad you said yes to this interview. Hey, thanks so much for being on the show. If you guys want to follow Chris Guillebeau, ChrisGuillebeau, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry my name's so long.
No problem. And be sure to check him out on the Twitter and all the other places. And again, $100 Startup's just out, and the website is $100startup.com. Thanks again, Chris.
Thanks for having me, man.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right.